and that's the other thing I'll mention too, is that we are going to record this session just for those who couldn't join today. So I hope that's okay with everyone. And like I said, yeah, if you have any follow-up questions after this session, you always feel free to reach out to Lauren or myself. Just to give you a little brief background about how we got to the place that we are in. So as probably a lot of you know already, is that Arts Nova Scotia has developed 2 new programs to provide operating support for professional arts organizations. And so when our funding was doubled last year for our operating program, we were really committed to reviewing the program and excuse me, and make sure that it's responsive to community needs and supported the long-term sustainability of the sector. So this review of the program considered many different things, one of them being the Building Back Better report, as well as Arts Nova Scotia's strategic priorities. And in addition, we had a public feedback survey and 3 targeted facilitated group discussions in the fall of 2023. So if you're interested in further information on those reports, priorities, or the share back from community, we also will post some of those links in the chat, but you can also go to our website and everything is can be found there. In general, there's consensus that the operating assistance program structure didn't allow for meaningful changes in funding levels or for the established organizations or the welcoming of new and emerging organizations. So organizations also felt like that the processes needed to be optimized and where we could better align with other funders. So just to get you a little bit orientated, I just wanted to go through a few different things because we understand that there's sometimes a little bit of confusion about whether to apply to Arts Nova Scotia or directly to the department through the Culture and Heritage Division for operating support. So here's sort of some of the major differences. Arts Nova Scotia supports organizations that create work by professional artists, produce work by professional artists, and present work by professional artists. And the Culture and Heritage Division supports organizations that produce cultural products, own or manage cultural facilities, provide services to the cultural sector, produce or present cultural festivals or events. In addition, if your organization is already receiving or has in the past received operating support from the Culture and Heritage Division, then you will continue to apply to their operating program. Now, I realize that they have not released their application information or deadlines yet, but I know that a communication is going to be coming out next week to give you that information. So just wanted to set the stage there a little bit because I know that there's a little bit of confusion in the community, which is understandable. So Arts Nova Scotia has developed 2 programs. You're obviously here for the Activate session, but we just wanted to give you some very high level overview of each program, just so you can get a sense of each one, and also to know that we are doing another information session next Wednesday at the same time for the Sustain program. So the Activate program was designed for artist-driven organizations who may be emerging, working on a more shorter term length, sort of like not thinking that they might be around forever, or with a smaller administrative capacity. It requires less reporting with a simplified application process, and the minimum annual revenues excuse me, is $40,000 in one of the last 3 reporting years. The Sustain program is designed for organizations with a proven history where strategic planning processes ensure the organization's ability to navigate change, adapt to new circumstances, and tolerate risk. We've aligned this program a lot more with the Canada Council for the Arts Applications, and there will be reporting through the CADAC database. Now, we have made some exceptions for those organizations who are not already registered, but you can find out more information about that if you're applying to that program. And the median annual revenue is $100,000 over the past 4 years. So those are some of the major differences, but we're going to really dive into the Activate program this round and Lauren's going to lead you through sort of the guidelines and application form.
Thank you, Briony. Thank you, everyone. we're going to do like more concentrated Q&As, as Brittany mentioned, sort of after we go through the guidelines, but I have a million tabs open on my computer right now in many different documents. So if you need me to repeat something, you can put it in the chat and Brittany will remind me, or you can just unmute yourself and give me a holler. Rather than put together like a whole other slideshow and things today, I thought we would just go through the guidelines together. This is where you'll find the information, and then I can sort of walk you through what everything means. Like all of our programs, you can find the information about this program at artsns.ca/programs. And then we're doing the operate activate. So there I am, the program officer, the contact person for this program. I am always available to answer any questions that you have about your application leading up to the deadline. And I will say, like, today we're going to answer lots of questions too, but if you do have sort of like really specific nitty-gritty questions about your particular organization, it might be a great idea to reach out to me over email or phone, and we'll set up a time to talk one-on-one. So underneath the program contact information are all of the most vital documents for this program. So there is the application form, and I'll just show you if you open that, you can see my screen, right? Okay. It stopped having the glow around it. So when you click on the application form, it will open up a separate document in Microsoft Forms. So keep that in mind. All of the questions that you're asked on the application form are outlined in the application checklist document. So fill out your application checklist document, and the last thing you'll probably do is fill out the application form. You can only fill it out twice. You can only fill it out once and you can't edit it. So that's sort of your best practice is to write everything out in a separate document and fill that out last. The second thing is the self-ID form, which also opens up into a Microsoft form, and I'll go over the self-ID form in a little bit more detail later. The third thing is the climate change questionnaire, which is also opens up in Microsoft Forms, but is totally optional for those applying to operate activate. There is a financial template, which will open in an Excel document. So you can download it here. But what is an option for you. You don't have to use the financial template that we have, but it is just there as an option. And that is outlined in the application checklist as well. So the application checklist, we'll go over that after the guidelines, but it's all right here. So Brittany mentioned the purpose of this program, and so I think I don't need to go into too much more detail, but as she also mentioned at the beginning, that we have an equity framework. So within this program and within the evaluation, priority will be given to equity deserving organizations and collectives. And so that also goes in, we go into more detail about the strategic priorities of Arts Nova Scotia and how it informs how we prioritize those groups. So what makes an organization or a collective eligible? That's normally the first question that people ask. And what's really interesting about this program is that this is the first time we've allowed for collectives to apply. So you can be a registered nonprofit with the Nova Scotia Joint Stocks, or you can be a collective of 2 or more artists that have been working professionally together as a group for the last 2 years. And there's a little bit more information. Like, obviously, I would encourage everyone to read through the guidelines in more detail, but those are the 2 categories. So you can either be in an organization registered with joint stocks as a nonprofit, or a collective of 2 or more professional artists that work together under the same group name on an ongoing basis. Your center of operations also has to be in Nova Scotia. You have to have been active for at least 2 years. So maybe you've only recently in the past 3 months registered to be a nonprofit. That's okay, as long as you've been working in the last 2 years and can kind of show a history of your programming and work. You have to have a mandate or shared purpose. So maybe you have a different form of governance in your collective. So you have a mandate or shared purpose to create, produce, and or present work by professional artists. You engage the advice and expertise of arts professionals in programming and administration, and pay professional fees according to industry standards. So if you're in visual arts, you're looking to CARFAC, for example. You have the capacity to complete and track required financial information. So when we talk about this, we're talking about an income statement, a balance sheet, and a budget forecast. Those are going to be the key financial things that we're looking at. And we can talk about that in more detail too. You're not required to have an audit or even like a paid accountant necessarily at this point, but we do need to see that you have financial practices in play. You have to have received at least 2 project grants from Arts Nova Scotia or other public arts funders in the last 5 years. If you are an organization who previously received operating assistance from Arts Nova Scotia, that also counts towards the project grants in the last 5 years. You have to have a minimum annual revenue of $40,000 or more in one of the past 3 years. So maybe last year was a really quiet year for you, and you were working at $15,000 like over the full year, but you had a really big Canada Council composite grant in 2 years before that puts you over that 40 range. We're good with that in terms of determining your eligibility. Of course, you also have to comply with all of Arts Nova Scotia's policies. So anyone applying to Arts Nova Scotia should check those out, but they're on our website under About. And I will just reiterate, sort of ineligible to this program are private or for-profit entities, businesses, things like that, organizations who receive operating assistance from the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, organizations whose primary mandate is education or training. So if you are a school that, like a nonprofit school that also does some programming, unfortunately, it wouldn't be eligible to this program. Incomplete applications also make you ineligible, and obviously organizations that receive sustained funding from Arts Nova Scotia are not eligible. So the maximum grant in this category is $25,000 annually. So we, if you are successful with this grant, it comes with a 2-year, like a 2-year funding agreement. So if you receive, just say $15,000 this year, you'll receive $15,000 the following year, and then after 2 years, you will reapply again. The other kind of great thing about this program that is new is that you can continue to apply to project grants at Arts Nova Scotia throughout the time that you receive your Activate funding. So you can receive 1 project grant, 1 professional development grant, and 1 commissioning grant per fiscal year. And just one of the things that we're also doing is we're going to look at increasing the maximum for project grants in our grants to organizations and groups program. So previously you could apply for up to $15,000 for a project, but that's actually going to be increasing to, I believe, $20,000. So stay tuned for that. As I mentioned, application intake happens every 2 years. There'll be a brief report required of you in between those 2 years so we can release your second year funding. This will reset at every assessment. So you can receive money for 2 years. You can decide to take 2 years off, come back another 2 years from there. But you can always reapply for 2 years, and then the funding necessarily isn't guaranteed between those years, but then you have a little bit more room to, grow your budget and reapply. So what should our application include? So we're going to go over the application checklist. how will our application be assessed? So if you're familiar with Arts Nova Scotia's programs, you'll know that we use peer assessment to make all of our decisions. So we bring in professional artists and arts workers in Nova Scotia to come through and read the applications and make assessments of those of our applications. What in this program they'll be doing is using an assessment tool that looks at 3 areas. So they're going to look at artistic impact, relevance and community impact, and organizational effectiveness. And I really want you to remember this part because this is what you should have in mind when you're writing your answers to your application. So when we're asking questions about your artistic programming, the things that the committee are going to consider are how your programming furthers the artistic vision of your organization or collective, how artistic risks or choices are taken, how programming choices are relevant and appropriate, how you commit to develop and support work by Nova Scotian artists. There's an accidental question mark there. We're finding things as we go. And also the effectiveness of practices that eliminate cultural appropriation or support meaningful representation, using appropriate protocols and practices. In the second category, relevance and community impact. So this is worth 30%. We're looking at the relevance of your organization to the community that you serve as demonstrated through your programming, audience development, outreach, and curatorial choices. How you provide opportunities for the public to engage with artists and how it serves your community. How you maintain meaningful relationships through mentorships, collaborations, and partnerships as appropriate. When we spoke to everyone about how they wanted to be evaluated, this was a really big one that they folks in the artistic community in Nova Scotia really value mentorships and collaboration. As well as the level of accessibility and engagement, including but not limited to physical spaces, cultural safety, affordability, and support for diverse participants. I'm just gonna put you on mute. Thank you. Okay, just gonna mail delivery. So organizational effectiveness is the last point on there. And this is where we're looking at your governance practices, policy and structure and policy and planning. So again, you might be a nonprofit that operates with the board. You might be a collective that makes, uses collective decision making. We just want to know more about that and see how you make those decisions. See how roles are defined among your staff, board, and volunteers as applicable. See that you're paying industry rates, so fair remuneration. We want to see clear reports and plans, financial reports, and also look at how you sort of plan for the year ahead and how you utilize communication and marketing. So those are the overall questions that are considered by assessors when they're looking at your application. So those are good questions to have in mind for yourself as well. So, and one thing I will mention, so in this particular program, what's going to happen is the peer assessors will use that assessment tool, create an evaluation of each organization, and then that evaluation will go to Arts Nova Scotia staff and board, who will then allocate the funds available based on those evaluations and our priority groups. So when will our funding be confirmed? This is a pretty general line that's on all of our programs. I think in this case, it's likely to take a little bit longer because it is a brand new program and because the applications might be more numerous. But for this, I would imagine that you would find out sort of end of May, early June in terms of your notification. What if a deadline falls on a weekend or holiday? That's sort of general business for Arts Nova Scotia, but it's always moved to the next business day. I will not go into great detail about how to submit my application, but I will flag a few really big things for us. So We do ask that you submit your application over email. And some things that are really important to note is that we cannot accept cloud-based attachments. They literally cause our computers to freeze and shut down. The government's sort of security is set up to really stay away from cloud-based attachments. So you can't send anything by WeTransfer, Google Drive, or Dropbox. Another thing that we've noticed a lot lately is if you do work with a Mac, please make sure that you convert especially numbers documents to Excel documents, because those are impossible to get into for us and really work against your application. So those are the things on there. So that's the general guidelines. That's what determines what makes people eligible, and how we're going to assess applications and award funding. The nitty-gritty sort of application parts are in this checklist that I talked about. So again, all of your required documents are at the top here. You go to the application checklist and it opens up. Up here is the checklist of all of the things that you may need for your application. So you can use it as a checklist yourself. So you'll need an application form, a self-ID form, which is optional, but allows us, of course, to know whether or not your organization fits within one of our priority groups, an optional climate change questionnaire, a written response with 4 different areas, and you'll notice that those really correspond to the assessment that we talked about. Financial statements if available. So if you do, work with an accountant or have financial software and you have financial statements from the last year, we'd like to see those. And then a projected budget for the next year is another thing that's required. Your support material and annotations, and your supplementary documents, which are also optional. One thing I'll show you is that this is sort of set up to provide more information for you. So if you're looking for, well, what do they mean by projected budget? That's on my checklist, but I don't know what it is. You can click on projected budget and it brings you down in the document to explain a little bit more. So provide a projected budget for your current fiscal year and year 1 of your funding request. You may choose to use the template provided on the program page or create your own. And then you can click back up to checklist. So I'll just go through the checklist generally and sort of make some highlights, but this is really what's going to be on your desk, up on your screen the entire time that you're putting together your application. The general info, we've talked a lot about to people with this. Obviously, you're often sending the same information to multiple applications and multiple funders. If you have information that absolutely fits the question that we're asking, please feel free to copy and paste from other applications. The word limits that are given to you are to give you a sense of the level of detail and time that we're expecting you to put in. We don't want you to have to duplicate efforts. You may include all written responses in the same document. And except for the application form, as I mentioned, all of these documents need to be submitted by 11:59 p.m. the day of the deadline. I talked about the application forms. You can click here again to have it open up in Microsoft Forms. A preview of the application form is available at the bottom of this page, so I can click full preview and it goes through and shows you the questions that it asks about your organization, your registration, a few questions about statistics, and then a general eligibility questionnaire. So as I mentioned before, for your written response, please refer to how our application will be assessed in the guidelines for information on how each section is evaluated. And these are the questions that we're going to ask you. So organizational profile, what is the mandate or shared objective of your organization? Remembering that we fund organizations with a mandate for professional artists to produce, present, create professional artworks in Nova Scotia. Provide this is supposed to say provide a brief history of your organization and collective, including notable accomplishments. So if there's been great projects that you've worked on, collaborations, grants that you've received, please include those. So who works at your organization or makes up your collective? What are their roles and experience? So I can provide a paragraph here. And if you're working with the collective, feel free to put in the, or you should put in the CVs for the individual members. And that will also make this part a little bit easier. Artistic impact. So this is provide an overview of your current programming, including what you've done in the past year. Is the so we're wondering, like, what are you working on right now and what have you done over the past 12 to 18 months is basically what we're asking in this question. In the second question, we're asking, what are you proposing that you're going to do during the 2-year grant period? So we understand that what you're going to do next year over the next 12 months is probably a lot more clear and has a lot more detail than what you're going to do in the following 12 months. And that's okay. We do understand that, but we're basically looking to make sure that you have thought through what you're going to do in the next 2 years and where this funding will go. And remember, these are kind of like very simple questions, but we've gone over, in terms of artistic impact, the types of things that we're looking for in what it is that your artistic impact is doing. The third part of your written response is your relevance and community impact. So how do you define your audience and community? This might be, directly related to what discipline you are, what community you live in, whether or not you're rural or urban. Like, we leave it up to you to define who it is that you are working for and who you see as your community. And then the second question there is, what strategies do you use or intend to use to engage your audience or community? So, you might have programming where you put on a show, but do you have any other outreach initiatives? How do you get folks into a show that otherwise wouldn't have come? Do you use word of mouth? Do you do maybe some teaching in the community that kind of builds up an audience? Those are the things that we're looking for there. Organizational effectiveness is next. We talked about what we're looking for. So we're going to ask you to describe your organization's governance or management structure, understanding that these could be different depending on your organization or collective. We're also wondering, what's your organization's collective's approach to planning for the future? Do you work from a strategic plan? Do you have a planning committee or programming committee that makes decisions together? We're just wondering about how it is that you are planning for those 2 years. And please describe how you manage your finances. So these might be different depending on how big your organization is or where you are, like whether or not you're new. So we're wondering, really basic things, understanding that everyone could be working differently. Financial statements, as I mentioned, those are, if they are available, please provide the signed copy that you have. So if you are a nonprofit, it is a requirement that you have signed financial statements or signed with the Registry of Joint Stocks. So those will already be on file for you. So if you could send them to us, that'd be great. A projected budget for your current fiscal year and one for your funding request. When you do your interim reporting in between the first and second year of funding, that's when you can update what you're intending to spend, what your budget will look like in that second year. So there's no need to project out your budget in detail over 2 years, just the first year for now. Support material or annotations. So we have multidisciplinary panels for this program. So not everyone's going to be familiar with you or your work or even your discipline. So support material is really important when you're choosing this, sort of put your best foot forward. There's, some detailed information in here, so making sure you obtain permission of artists that are involved. But these are the basic limits that you can submit. So up to 3 audio samples with a total of 15 minutes. Same with video. You can put in some photographs, which should actually say 10. And you can include your website or social media links. So if you have like an Instagram that you're really active on, or like a website that you have like a lot of your organizational history on, that's great. And it's always great to include an annotated list of support material so that assessors kind of know what they're looking at. So photographs are a good example of this. Sometimes, you can see a photo, just say of a performance, and we're not really sure what we're looking at, but maybe with an annotation, it says like, this is who the set designer was. This is demonstrating, how we adapted this show from one place to another. So that becomes really helpful. We're also just leaving you some room to include some supplementary documents if you have them. So these are not required in any way, but they might be things that fall outside of either the written information or the support material, which really shows people the artistic work that you're doing. So maybe your organization or collective has a strategic plan. Maybe you're new and you have some really great mentors that are willing to write, letters of support. Maybe you've collected testimonials from your audiences in the past. Maybe you have like a really great policy, like on mentorship or collaboration that you would like to highlight, and you can include that in there. So I guess I talked for about 30 minutes, but that is in a nutshell the program guidelines and application. Any questions, I guess I will say, or Brini, was there anything that I missed?
Nancy has a question.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Nancy.
Hi there. Thanks so much for that presentation. Just a question around the ineligibility of educational organizations.
Mhm.
So is that if you're primarily, and I'm thinking about an arts therapy program too, or arts therapies, if that would make you ineligible. Because is there a difference between an organization that has educational aspects to it and one that is focused on education and learning?
Yes, I would say that there is a difference there. It's sort of, what is your mandate? If your mandate is primarily to, to teach your particular discipline, and especially work with pre-emerging, or like youth, pre-emerging artists or youth, if that's your mandate, then that's what we're talking about. As for like art therapy involved, I couldn't answer that right off the top of my head. I would have to see the organizational profile.
Okay.
But that's sort of what we're talking about,
Thank you.
Lauren, I have a question about the grants from art funding organizations.
Yeah.
Does that mean organizations that are focused on funding the arts, or well, let me just give you an example. We have a grant from Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage that is supporting a professional artist who's providing painting classes to neurodivergent adults for a year. I don't know whether that would count or not. We have another grant that came in from New Horizons for Seniors that also supported professional artists in providing workshops in nursing homes and also some craft and painting workshops for independent seniors.
Mhm. What we're really looking for when we're looking for past grant history is like a history of peer assessment and being recognized by artists peers in a lot of ways. So I we're looking at what would have been like what you were evaluated on. Were you evaluated on artistic impact and you know the artistry of the artists involved? You know, sometimes there may be grants available through other organizations whose mandate isn't necessarily to support the arts, quote unquote, but maybe is to support, you know, seniors or things like that. And arts are one of the ways that you can do that. So that's why we're saying arts, like arts funding, is what we're looking for.
Okay, that helps. Thanks.
Welcome.
Hi,
Hi,
I have a
Kelly.
question. I can't figure out how to do the hand raise.
That's okay.
I'll do this.
Yeah.
Thanks for the info. I think this is clear in what you said, but I just want to confirm. So when we're budgeting, we only need to give info for like the next upcoming year, but when we're writing out plans and thoughts, that is including the next year plus the following?
Yep.
Correct? Okay, cool.
So it'll be your next
Thanks.
fiscal. So you will, for finances, show us what you're doing this fiscal, so
Mhm.
that you're in, and that depends on what your fiscal year is, not our fiscal year. Yeah, great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Anne, I saw that you unmuted yourself. I wasn't sure if you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the information, and it's an exciting grant. The question I have is in regards to financials. You said a balance sheet and income statement. Do they have to be documents that are reviewed, or do they have to be notice of reader? Or as long as they're a balance sheet and an income statement?
As long as they're a balance sheet and income statement, if they're internally generated, that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. I just, the part with it is that the organization that I do work with is predominantly our work is the fact of it's all project money.
Mhm.
And then we pull our project money together at the end of the year to file a income statement and a balance sheet.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's one of our challenges as an organization is we have minimal money
Mhm.
to do to do general enhancement or development within like policies and that. So that those are things that we would be looking for our grant potentially, is that it's to strengthen the organization with identify, methods and identification of new volunteers, helping to create policies and practices. We're currently in a project right now to work on that, but obviously having the opportunity with this funding would enable us to strengthen and enhance the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the intention of the fund is to make sure that our organizations that have previously been project to project do have some breathing room to work on those parts that will ultimately strengthen your organization and make you position you better for future grants. One thing that I will say is that we're not specifically looking for an application that talks about what you'll do if you receive $10,000-$15,000, like we'll create this many policies or do this many things. We're really just asking, what do you do as an organization? What do you intend to do on the whole for the next year? Which does differentiate a lot from the project funding. So we're looking big picture, bird's eye view of your organization and everything that you do as a complete package, as opposed to the specific things that you'll do with this particular money.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. It provides, I think it provides us the insight that I want to say helps us towards the point of what we what we're attempting to do without the grant as such right now.
Yep.
In moving forward and strengthening our organization.
That's great.
Thank you.
Kathleen.
Hi, I thought of another one.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously it has the maximum amount to ask for is 25,000. And here I feel like you folks field this question all the time and it's hard to answer specifically, but is there any sort of guideline that's helpful for us to use in terms of, do I ask for 25? Do I ask for 15? Even in terms of like percentage of our overall budget or something like that. So we're like not pie in the sky somewhere.
I wonder if Brainy has an answer right off. I have like I have half that answer for you.
Okay.
Someone asked this question this morning, and what I was saying is like it is a maximum of 25,000. So when we're like probably the people who would be most eligible for like likely to receive 25,000 would be those that fall in the upper upper range. So it's 40,000 for your budget is where this program starts. Once you receive 100,000, you can go into the other program. You don't have to. Maybe it's like it makes a lot of sense for you to keep going. You know, in this based on it's way easier to apply to, way less administrative work, and financial reporting work. But it's those organizations with those larger budgets probably that are rounding the like 100,000 or higher range that would be looking at the 25,000. And they would be organizations that score really highly in the evaluation, and also might meet our priority groups. So I would use so that's about 25%, right? Is one way to look at it. But as opposed to project funding, where we're really just giving you what you asked for, this is going to be looked at holistically as the package of applications, and we will aim to distribute funds as equitably as possible based on the amount of applicants we have. Yeah.
I think that was more than half of an answer.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that was a good answer.
Yeah, that makes lots of sense and that's helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. Nancy, you had another question?
Yeah, sorry, just another quick question. I noticed the application form is online and the rest is submitted through email. Is that correct? Is it
Yes.
possible to submit that application also through email, or that has to be done on your online portal?
It has to be done on the online portal. And the reason is that then that creates a report that goes out to our grants management team, and that's how things get put in our system. We unfortunately just don't have the ability for you to attach anything to that form. And so that's why we have to use all the attachments over email.
That's
Yeah.
the only one on the portal.
Yes.
It's,
Okay, thank you.
and the self-ID form.
And the self-ID. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I'm trying to think of a few other questions that have been asked of us so far. Obviously asking for how much money is one thing that is asked. I can speak a little bit to, so the climate change questionnaire is on there. And as I mentioned, it's totally optional if you're in this if you're applying to this program. But one thing that we're particularly interested in as an arts council is sort of what the impact of climate change is on artists and arts organizations. So it's more of a way that we're tracking how organizations are responding or not responding or need help responding to the climate crisis. And so if you can fill that out, I know a lot of you are thinking about that in the work that you do. And it's really going to be helpful in sort of helping us get a sense of what's going on out there, and also maybe proposing new policies or changes or programs. I won't make you stay here, but please, this is a great time to ask questions. There's no silly questions either.
I have a question.
Yes, hello, Carrie.
Hey, I was wondering if for this first round of this new um, structure, are you folks more available for appointments or consultation in advance of the deadline?
Yeah, so I guess I would say that we are as available as we've always been, which is that we're pretty available. Um, that being said, like, now's the time to book in your appointments, because it does get really busy, but I do try to make every effort to meet with anyone that's putting together an application. And this is advice no matter what program you're coming to, but the more information you come to that meeting with, the more the more useful it's going to be to you. So if you plan on applying, put together a draft, and I can look at that draft with you and go through and let you know if I see sort of any red flags or questions or things that I know that would come up in assessment. We can do that over Teams. I have some availability to do that in person or over the phone. And any program officer for any program will do that for you.
Mhm. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Lauren.
Kathleen?
I'm back. I'm going for the record here. Okay, so I'm just trying to understand in terms of ability to apply to like the small group and organization project. So let's say I go all out, and on March 15th, I'm going to submit to this program, and like I'm never going to do this, but let's say I'm going to do that, and then the 3 other things that I'm allowed to do.
Yep.
Let's say, oh my goodness, it's 4 for 4. I'm in for everything. So would that then mean basically the next time I'm eligible to write the project pro-def or commission would be like the following March?
Yes.
Head-nods. Okay, cool. But if I submitted a project grant now in March, let's say I'm able to become a Activate person, but I don't get the project grant, could I then do another project application in October?
Yes.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Sometimes the fiscal year wording just gets me like,
Right.
God, which end of the
Right.
spectrum is it on, sort of thing, cycle.
Absolutely. And for the most part, our programs, the way they work out is that the calendar year of the deadline still corresponds to the fiscal year for the most part. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Just
Okay,
based on
that
the
feels
months that are
clear.
Thank
Thank
yes,
you.
and I think we're gonna have to call that, I don't know, like shoot the moon or something, where you apply on March 15th and get for grants. Maybe there'll be a door prize. Maybe a chocolate bar. I don't know. It's whatever I can give you.
And just so you're, everyone's clear, is that those project grants also include, so you can apply to the orgs and groups deadline, but also it would include the Artists and Communities program. So if that's a project grant that you are aiming for, it does include that. That's only one project grant for the whole fiscal year. So if that makes sense.
And I know this, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Also, I'm competing with Kathleen for most. And the project, I know this call isn't about that, but the project grants, do you have the deadline for those?
Yeah. So project grants for orgs and groups is March 15th as well.
Well, okay, they're
And
all.
yeah, it wasn't this year. We don't normally have our operating grant fall on the same date, but because we didn't release our deadlines until January 12th, we wanted to give people 2 months this year to sort of prepare for it. Normally we have that deadline in February, but anyways, it's March 15th, but it's again in October 15th. So you don't need to try to scramble to get all of the applications in for March 15th. We have another deadline in the fall. And then for our Artisan Communities program, it's March 1st and October 1st.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
There's usually a spring and a fall deadline for most of our programs.
And just a clarifying question there again, I'm going back to the arts therapy. It feels like there's kind of a spectrum of your community outreach education organization, or you're a professional artist performance event, and this one is geared to that. If you're more on the education community outreach side, the project grant is more toward that. Am I distinguishing them properly?
I think the answer is it depends and
Yeah.
what the project is, and also like Lauren said, we probably would have to have maybe a one-on-one conversation with your specific group and sort of being able to sort of advise better.
Yeah, that makes
where it
sense.
might fall.
With the pitch in more
Yeah.
detail. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I won't take more time on this here, but we'll meet.
It's not, it's just, yeah, just
No,
trying to
no,
make
no,
sure that we
I
can-
think you're right, because it sounds like it depends.
Yeah.
Okay.
Peggy.
Can't hear you, Peggy. You're on mute.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I know that somebody asked this, but I just want to clarify. Artistic impact, you're looking at the previous year, the current year, and what's proposed for the next 2 years that the funding would be provided.
Yep.
But then with the budget, you're just looking for current and year one. Is that? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Well, while I have you captive, like if you need to go, then certainly. I will just point you out, like I can show you a few more resources that are on our website if it is your first time applying to Arts Nova Scotia, or you are now just thinking, well, maybe I'll look at the orgs and groups deadline. I'll just bring up our website again. And at the top here is a resources tab. The first thing on the resources tab is how to apply for Arts Nova Scotia grants. And this is the first thing I point everyone to. So read the application form and guidelines carefully. We did that together today, so we're already on a roll. Brush up on our policies. When in doubt, ask. So the program officer is there. So as Carrie asked, we are absolutely available.
Sorry, your screen's not sharing if that's what you intended to do.
Okay. Oh, I see.
There you go.
I see. Okay, yeah. So all of the things I was saying, they're all listed here. And the clarify your idea more refers to project grant funding, but is really helpful in understanding kind of how like the structure of a grant is written. And then we have some information in there about, peer assessment committees, choosing your support material, and read, rewrite, and revise. Your peers are great editors. but also on here are submitting your application over email. There's a Am I a Professional Artist quiz, which is really helpful if you're new to applying to Arts Nova Scotia. A general glossary of terms, so some things that you might see in Arts Nova Scotia applications that you're unfamiliar with, they might be in there. There's also a life cycle of a grants application, which is really helpful in kind of understanding what happens once I send in my application. Well, lots of things happen. And so the life cycle kind of takes you through there. And why it takes 8 to 12 weeks and sometimes more to hear back. Yeah, and there are a few other things along here. Certainly if peer assessment is something that sounds interesting to you and you would like to volunteer to be part of an assessment sometime, and when I say volunteer, it is paid work, but you can sign up here as well. But people might not always know that those resources are there, but we update them fairly frequently. And there are always great resources in putting together applications.
Good.
Oh, I don't think our Am I a Professional Artist quiz is working.
Oh, no.
It's working on my, it's pretty simple. I call it like a Cosmo quiz. Like you kind of have to do everything yourself. Like you have to tally up your own points.
I just don't see a link to the quiz, but that's okay. This is not.
Oh,
I can-
okay. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. There's a link to the longer document, but there's not I couldn't find a quiz. But that's okay. We can.
And I'll just note, just in case you go look at the Orgs and Groups project grant, everything is the same except for those that funding increase that we mentioned, or the max amount that you can request has not been updated yet on the website. So just know that that's coming in the next couple weeks. So.
Thank you both.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, folks.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up, but in 5 minutes, even if you have a question, just send us an email. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
I'm gonna assume that Terry has stepped away, so I'll end the meeting.
All right.